Narnia. Nerds in Paradise. The glorious Caribbean sun was attempting to slide stealthily over the horizon when Rachel Nickleby rolled out of bed and set off in search of breakfast. In spite of spending the previous couple of days travelling to Banania in various forms of discomfort, Rachel, mother of Nigel Nickleby, Digibeet's co-founder and lead engineer, was wide awake and ready to organise her environment. Fortunately for Nigel, rather than staying with the rest of his team and his mother at the Manta Ray Bay Resort, he and Connor O'Connor, his co-founder, resided in a small, tumble-down shack a short distance away. So it was some time later that Rachel was able to greet and update her only son on a variety of insights and suggestions for improvements to the resort, the kitchen, the staff, the offices, the workshop, and basically everything. But, being an ardent eco-warrior, these good intentions evaporated immediately as Rachel, with mounting desperation, witnessed the arrival of Nigel and Connor, enshrouded in a dense cloud of dirty black diesel smoke emitting from the company's ageing minibus. But before she had any chance to berate them, Nigel and Connor were intercepted by Lily, Nigel's secretary and faithful sidekick. Or at least that's what Nigel wished she were. Lily had some urgent but delicate information which involved Connor in particular. Lily cautiously and regretfully related to Connor and Nigel the story of the Digibeet and their connection to Banania's enemies, the neighbouring island of Euphonian. Apparently, the Digibeet had, many years ago, been one of Banania's original great families, owning a big sugar plantation and living in a big house called Anki Arl. When slavery was abolished, times became hard for the Digibeet, so in the late 1800s, they moved into the retail business, selling Anki Arl and setting up Digibeet's department store in St Hilda's. Lily told that Doris, or Doris as she calls herself, and her father actually lived in an apartment above the store, though she didn't think that Doris would admit it. And Doris wasn't French at all, but spent her childhood in a school in a place called Pontefract, somewhere in England. Before Connor could break in and complain, Lily continued with the hardest part of her story. Now this is where it gets a little bit hard for you, Connor. You see, the Digibeet have been trying to get Anki Arl back for 100 years now, but they've never had no money. So a few years back they was approached by the Euphonian Intelligence and Educational Involvement Organisation, the EIEIO. That is where all the spies come from. The Euphonians have been trying to take over Banania for a lot of years now, saying as it still belongs to them, which is of course big nonsense. Anyway, those wicked Euphonians has been spying on Banania and has promised the Digibeet that they will get Anki Arl back once Euphonia invades and takes over Banania. This is, of course, if the Digibeet will help them by spying for Euphonia. And that is what Doris and her father do. Everybody knows it. They both dig up information and send it over to Euphonia. And I'm very sorry to say, Connor, but that is why she's pretending to be your friend, so that she can get information about what we are all doing here, because they think that we're some kind of secret weapons facility. But by now Connor had heard enough and worked himself up into a real rage. "Well, no, I've heard everything. What a crock of absolute fictitious nonsense this is. I've heard me share of silly stories in me life, but this takes the biscuit, so it does, and I'm very, very angry. Just who do you think you are, young woman, meddling in the business of your betters, in something that certainly does not involve you in any way, shape or form?" But that was just too much for Nigel. "Now, just take it easy, Connor. All right. Listen, Lily is certainly better than most people I know, and she was only trying to help, trying to protect us from whatever these Euphonian people are doing." But Connor's ears were sealed shut to reason, and he turned on Nigel. "And you should know better than to believe any of this balderdash. You're so besotted with this Lily girl here. Don't you believe everything she tells you?" "Me besotted? Listen, if there's any besotting going on, it's between you and that Doris Dutherby, Connor." "I'm certainly not besotted. She's a dear friend of mine, and her name is Doris, not Doris. Now, if you both don't mind, I have a rendezvous with that self-same dear friend, whose company I would be happy to replace with yours any day." And with that, Connor stormed out of the building. "Besotted?" queried Lily. "Yes, it means, I know what it means, but what did Connor mean?" asked Lily carefully. Well, it was just annoyed at hearing the truth, that's all, and I'm really sorry he was unkind to you," stuttered Nigel, which was good enough for Lily, for the time being. Well, a short while later, a still mumbling and grumbling Connor arrived at Doris Dutherby's office in Dutherby's departmental store, where, just to show that there were no hard feelings over being attacked by that coconut-snatching monster machine, see a previous episode, she presented Connor with a very special gift, a bright green parrot named Clarence. Though at times a little, how shall we say, ethnic, is very clever, and all the best homes have them. In reality, like Doris, Clarence was a Euphonian secret agent, codenamed Golden Eagle, who'd been cleverly trained to repeat what people say to each other in what they naively believed to be the privacy of their own homes. Doris recommended that because he was such an intelligent bird, rather than leaving Clarence in their little house all day, Connor should place his cage in the company boardroom, where there was lots of conversation to stop him getting bored. Meanwhile, back at Manta Ray Bay, Nigel's eco-warrior mum lost no time in berating Nigel about the bus and their boat kicking out so much smoke. So after much tedious discussion, she eventually persuaded Nigel to at least modify the bus's diesel engine to run on used chip fat oil. Unfortunately, St. Hilda's, Banania's capital, did not possess a great many chip shops. So the team dutifully relieved the owner of the Soul chip shop of all her old chip fat, which was certainly an improvement on dumping it in the sea, which was her usual method of disposal. And after some tinkering and tweaking, the old bus eventually ran on the heavily filtered chip oil. But now it caused a great deal of consternation, to say nothing of coughing and choking, as it drove down the main street smelling like, well, a rampant chip shop, really. The main problem, though, was the severe shortage of used chip shop oil, caused mainly by Banania's severe shortage of chip shops, in that there was, of course, just one on the whole island. Then somebody remembered a clip they'd once seen on BBC Children's News Hour about an outboard motor running on coconut oil. Some Googling later they came across Coconut Pacific, an Australian organisation who had developed a process for manually extracting virgin coconut oil in remote villages in the Pacific Islands. And thanks to the coconut cropper, which excelled in snatching ripe coconuts from the trees before they fell at great velocity on someone's head, they had a significant supply of coconuts. So, some Zoom calls and WhatsApps later, had a shiny new set of Coconut Pacific's direct micro-expelling equipment flying across the globe in their direction. Meanwhile, Connor became quite attached to Clarence the parrot, mainly because Clarence just repeated whatever Connor said and didn't ask difficult questions. So, for some weeks, Connor looked after the bird with much care and attention, even treating it to the occasional drop of his fabled Connor's cocktail. At their next meeting, Doris Digibeet insisted that Connor allow the toiletier to groom the bird once a week. Persons in our position can't possibly be expected to do that sort of thing themselves. Now can they? Come. So a blatantly oblivious Connor dutifully delivered Clarence the parrot to his beloved Doris each week to be groomed, picking him up later each afternoon. Unbeknown to Connor, though, Euphonian agents took the parrot away each time for debriefing, carefully noting down everything it said. But frustratingly for them, Clarence chatted away, but often missed out the most significant parts of interesting business conversations, causing maddening confusion. Or he didn't quite get it right and mixed conversations or phrases together, which often made the Euphonians jump to the completely wrong conclusions about what Digibeet were doing. "Please pass the coffee over here, Larry," easily became "Big splash coffin in the rear lorry." So here's the new design for a tree copper metamorphosized into "So please resign and be a real copper." And "Wake him up or he'll start to snore" became the devastating "Time's up, we'll start a war." And the cyborgs somebody proposed to use got wonderfully translated into the sideboards. And at least 2 debriefing agents took sick leave, complaining of burnout after hearing nothing the whole day but Clarence's constant insistence that Connor is a pretty boy, Connor is a pretty boy, Connor is a pretty boy. And now the directors of Euphonian's Secret Service, the EIEIO, started to have grave doubts about the whole operation, including Doris's wild story about a coconut-grabbing machine, which we all doubtless heard about in a previous episode, did we not? Did we? Meanwhile, back at the resort, Nigel and Paige had installed the Coconut Pacific equipment and taught 4 of the villagers to grate, dry, press, and finally filter the oil out of the coconut flesh, until at last they had pure, clear coconut oil with which to fuel the bus and the boat. Now, when they drove around town in their rattly old bus, they were greeted with appreciative smiles and dreamy looks as people breathed in the mouth-watering scent of roasted coconut instead of a fog of disgusting diesel fumes. Now let's go back to Clarence the parrot. After one particularly arduous debriefing and a very skimped grooming session, Clarence was returned to the Digibeet conference room were, after